So here we are, the space that we'll be creating together in Blender and Godot. So you can see here we have this wall, and if I go towards it, you can't go through it. We have this maze here, which once I grab it, I can throw this at the wall, but you can see it just bounces off. This one gives us a little feedback, both by growing spikes and playing some music, that it can smash the wall. So let's build this. Before we get into Godot, we are going to make some quick assets from scratch using Blender. Before getting to it, you want to go to Preferences, and you want to go to your add-ons or extensions, and you want to have two extensions here. We want to have Bool Tool right there. You can download that through extensions or enable it through add-ons. And then we also want Cell Fracture. So with those both set up, let's get going. So we're going to make a pen of wall, like a walled-in pen, and we're going to have a section of it that blows up, and we're going to make a hammer, and we're just going to make everything pretty simple out of cubes. So here, let's get going. So here we have our first cube to the scene. And before we even edit it, we're going to go and add a modifier there. And the modifier we're going to add is Solidify. So now on the cube, we'll press Tab for Edit. We will delete the top and bottom faces. There they go. And we will crank up the thickness over here in the Solidify modifier so we can see some thickness on it. And now we'll press A for select all, G for grab, Z for Z-axis, and hold down Control so we just snap it so it's right on level with the floor. Now I'll go ahead and press S for scale, Shift and Z. We're just going to make this pen open up. And you can see, because we're using this nice modifier, the wall stays the same thickness throughout. Now I'm going to press the number 2 to select edges, click and space to deselect, hold down the Option or Alt key, click the top edge, and you can see we've selected that loop. G for grab, Z for Z-axis, and we'll lift this straight up. And of course, your room does not have to be square, so we can just bevel off a little corner right there if we want. And there we go, we have the wall. So now we want to make a hole in the wall. So for starters, I'm going to hover over this Solidify modifier with my mouse hovering over it. I'm going to press Control or Command A, and now you can see this is applied. And now we're going to create a Boolean to cut through the wall. And to make an irregular shape, we're going to do, like I said, everything's cubes. We're going to work with another cube. So here we have our new cube, Shift A, add cube. I'm going to hit the / key, and here we are in edit mode. I want to turn this into an irregular shape. So I'm going to press 3 for face select. I'm going to hit search with F3 or spacebar if you have that set up, as I do. And I'm going to search try, and here's the option triangulate faces. You can see it's just put these diagonal cuts on our faces. Now I'm going to right click on this and choose the option subdivide, which is not the same as the modifier. Similar, but not the same. And here you can see it's just cutting this into more triangles, but we're going to turn up the smoothness, and we're going to turn up the cuts to about 3, and then we're going to crank this fractal factor, and you can see it just kind of blobs out into a weird shape. And that's all we want, is a weird shape. All right, so now press / so we're back into the scene. We got this weird shape, and we're just going to press G to grab, X for X-axis, and just stick it somewhere. This is where we're putting it. Now that we have Bool Tool set up, we select the blob first, we select the wall second, and we press Control Shift B. If you're on a Mac, it's still Control, not Command. And here we have Auto Boolean, which will just complete the whole task for us and apply all the modifiers. And the one that we want, which is Brush Boolean, and we're going to go for difference. And now you can see it's cut a little hole in the wall. Now you might be thinking that wasn't such a careful placement, and that's okay, because the beauty of Brush Boolean is we can grab this bounding box and just kind of move it and scale it up to get whatever shape or size we want. And you know, we can rotate this around, we can move it in and out the X-axis, and we have all these different ways we can customize the hole. Let's just scale it up a little more until it really just like breaks the whole wall open. What we don't want is like a little floating piece. That's no good. Just lift that up, and that looks fine to me. Got a nice little break open in this wall, or a nice big one. And before we apply it, we're going to learn a quick thing about booleans. So over here, if I select the wall, we can see the boolean modifier. It's set to difference. If we set it to union, it just combines it all into one shape. If we set it to intersect, it just gives us the area where it intersects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this wall. And then I'm going to press Shift D, and here we have another one, and you can see it's still getting cut because it has the same modifier on it. And I'm going to right click or press Escape so it drops it back in the same place. And I'm going to change this one to intersect. Now that I've done that, I'm just going to quickly press the letter A for select all, spacebar for search, and type the word mesh, and convert to mesh, even though these aren't meshes, because it's a quick way to apply all our modifiers to all our objects. Now in the scene outliner, I'm going to select the cutters. I'm going to select the cube inside and just press X. We don't need those anymore. Moving back to the wall, we've got this section, which is kind of a hole in the wall. We'll call it wall frag for fragments. And we're going to want that in its own section for reasons that will be apparent. So we'll hover over that and press the letter M and add it to a new collection, which we'll call fragments. There we go. So just one thing in there. Almost ready to shatter it. We're going to give it a new material. And that material will just be kind of like a greenish material. We'll call it G1, or we'll just call it green. I don't know why I'm abbreviating that. And go into material view so we can actually see it. And then we're actually going to give this a second material. And for that material, we'll kind of give it this dark purpley color, or I don't know why. And we'll call that purple. And now we'll select the wall and we'll shift select that hole. And we'll press Control L and link materials. There we go. So now we're ready to shatter this. So we'll click on this area that we're going to break into fragments, and we'll search again. We'll type cell, and here we have cell fracture. And we want to look carefully. We have a lot of different options here, and I do encourage you to experiment with this tool. It can do a lot of interesting things. But what I want to do is look at this mesh data thing, and I want to set the inner material not to mesh material 0, but material 1. Material 0 is going to be green. Material 1 is going to be purple. So now I'll hit OK. And there it goes. Shattered the space. Now we still have a big chunk there. So I'm going to click twice, and there's the big piece. I'm going to move that out of the way and hit X and delete it. And now we just have little pieces everywhere. So we're going to have this smash open. And to do that, we're going to add some simple physics. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select our object section with the wall, and we'll press Shift A and add a plane. And now I'm going to press S for scale and 100 because we want a really big plane to do this on. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the plane the same color. Whoops. As everything else, because I just don't want to stare at the white, but the plane doesn't need any color at all, actually. So now that we have that plane selected, I'm going to hit the object menu, and we're going to go to rigid body and add passive. And now we can click on all these little pieces here. That's going to take us forever. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the plane. We're going to select the wall. We'll press Control I for invert. And if you have other things in your scene, we did keep these in a little folder here, so it'll be easier. It'll still be easy to get to the fragments. And now we'll hold Shift and click one of these objects again, so it's an active selection. We'll go to Object, Rigid Body, Add Active, Object, Rigid Body, Copy from Active. And now if we hit Shift and Spacebar, you can see we got some pieces that fall apart, and the inside is green, purple, not green. So I think we just have 2 more cubes to go and we're done. So our next cube is going to be our breaker. So we put this right here. We're going to move it up a little bit on the z-axis, and open our timeline. We're going to go to Object, Rigid Body, Add Active. But now we're actually going to go to the physics section. And that is right over here. Click on this physics tab. It looks kind of like a planet orbiting a sun. And we're going to go to the rigid body sections. We're going to switch it from not animated to animated. So to shatter our scene, what we're going to do is we're going to put this cube here. We're going to give it, we're going to press I, which you can see sets keyframes for location, rotation, and scale all at the same time. We're going to go forward a little bit in our timeline. So it's just kind of started to break. See that? That's good. And then we'll press G for grab, Z for Z-axis, sorry, X for X-axis, and we'll move it through the wall so it can push it out that way. We'll press I for keyframe, and then we want this thing to get out of the way quickly. So once it smashes through the wall, we'll go to frame 11, and we'll press S for scale and 0. So the thing is just gone, and press I again. So now when we go back to the beginning, we can see it'll smash the wall open with all the pieces going. We'll just let that animation play all the way till the end or till everything's still. So now I'm going to scrub backwards slowly in the animation till I see all the pieces flying back and flying out again. I'm actually going to go ahead and hide the floor so I can see them more clearly. It's still working. And I think this is a good spot. So it looks like we can smash this thing open in 40 frames. So here for our frames, we're actually going to reduce that to 40 as our end frame. We're going to press A for select all. We're going to go back to Object. We're going to go to the rigid body section and bake to keyframes. So now we can delete the floor. I guess that wasn't a cube. It was supposed to be all cubes. We can delete this white cube, and now the wall will just burst open on its own, and it's all baked, so it'll export perfectly. So that's done. Now we just need a hammer. That will be no problem. Shift A, create a cube, / that's the only thing we're looking at. Scale it way down small. Zoom in on that. And now in edit mode, we're just going to press S for scale, X for X-axis, a little length to it. Grab the bottom face, press I for inset, S and X, get that down more or less to a square. I'll press E for extrude, ES to go in a little bit, E to extrude again, ES, stretch it out, E to extrude, ES, bring it in, that's extrude size, or extrude scale, I guess. E to extrude, ES, bring it out, E to extrude, and then we'll scale it down so it kind of has a pointy bottom. I think that looks pretty good. I think just to make our hammer just ever so slightly fancier, we'll select the ends and do Control B. Bevel them a little bit. Or you know what? Maybe we'll just press A and select everything and just bevel the whole thing. Yeah, that looks great. Yeah, let's just bevel the whole thing. And here in this little bevel menu, we can flip that up. We can turn on clamp overlap so it doesn't actually damage anything in the process. And I think that looks pretty good. It did look kind of cooler with the dramatic bevel, but whatever, this is fine. So now we've got our hammer complete. I'm just going to give it one of our colors we've already made. So it has a color to it, and we're good to go. So I'll press slash. We've got this whole scene. We got our wall, we got our hammer, and we got the thing. So I want to select everything but the hammer first. So I'll select the hammer, and I'll press Control I. So we have this whole section, and now we'll go to Export, GLB, and we'll go to the correct folder. call it break apart. And now for our settings, we want to include selected objects because we've selected the thing. If we have modifiers on it, we might want to apply those. There's other demos for that. If you have image materials, you might want to change them to compress them. We're just keeping it really simple here. What is important is for the animation, we want to go to Actions, Active Animation Merged, and then we want to scroll down and we're going to call it Break, all lowercase. Now, if we wanted this to be a looping animation in Godot or Unity, we would add -loop to the end, but we don't want this to be a looping animation. So now we'll hit export. We're good to go. I'm going to just press H to hide that. Now we have the hammer, and I think the hammer should actually have a little animation too, so we can tell that when we've got the special hammer. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to add a shape key and we'll animate it in Godot. So here we've got the shape key setting. We go to the object data properties, and we're going to hit plus again. And now in edit mode, we're going to look at key 1. And what are we going to do to show that one of the hammers means business more than the others? I think we'll have this one kind of telescope out. I think that'll be kind of cool. So I selected both ends, and now I'll press Option E, and we'll do extrude individual faces. And now I'll press E and S. Oops, not that, sorry. I'm going to press I for inset, and then press Option E, extrude individual faces out again, and then I for inset, Option E, extrude individual faces, and then I'm going to press the period key and choose individual origins and press S and 0. So this hammer kind of turns spiky. And here you can see if we go back to object mode, the hammer looks normal. But here on this shape key, if we drag the value, you can see the spikes come out. And now we just go to File, Export again, Export GLB. And we want to make sure, just include the selected object. And for data, we've got this option shape keys. It's checked by default, but just making sure. And now call this hammer. We'll export that. And you're almost ready for the Godot demo. The last thing you're going to need is some sound effects. So I recommend you just record some things around the house. In my demo of the wall smashing, I actually just dropped some markers on the table and slowed the recording down so it would sound louder. Pretty much anything works. So now I will see you in Godot. Okay, so now that we've got our assets, we're ready to set this up in Godot. So I went over how to make our 3D assets. Some things that I would recommend is, especially if you're in my class, come up with your own skybox, and you should definitely create your own sound assets. So we have our assets that we created, our 3D files. So I have those just in a folder right here, and I'm going to just drag that right into the asset section. Here they are, loading in. So there we have them, assets for demos. We've got the break apart GLB and the hammer GLB, which is everything that we need. In this template, if you're in the class, I do recommend you download the newest version of the template. We've got kind of like a base floor with kind of like a procedural clear material that you can use for things. Then there's also just like a basic kind of flattened cube collision on top of that. You can see they're not actually that well aligned. So we're going to make our floor from scratch. All right, so let's get into that. Let's take the collision here, bring it down just a little bit so it's more in line with the floor. And then for this floor, we don't actually want this to be glass, I don't think. So here we'll select that. And then in the inspector, we have this option surface material override. And here where it says shader, we're just going to reset that. In fact, we're just going to hit the reset button on everything. And for material override, we're just going to hit new standard material. And we don't really need to do anything fancy here. I just don't want it to be bright white. So I'll go to this option, albedo, and I'll select that and make this dark gray. But if you just want to start working with the glass floor, you can do that too. Another thing is we do have this nice 3D collider, but I'm going to add a second collision shape here in this static body that's the floor. So I'm going to hover over that. I'm going to press Control D. And now I'm going to go over here where it says box shape, which is what the other one is. And I'm going to hit the little reset button so it says nothing. And then, or it says empty, not nothing. And I'm going to choose this option, world boundary. And you can see it sets this world boundary. It's a little lower than the plane, which is okay. And I will go ahead, actually go to the transform section and just scale it up by 2 times. So now we just have this nice big square. So if you've ever had the problem in some of your VR worlds where you kind of fall off the edge and you fall forever until it crashes, this will prevent that. So if you fall off the floor, you'll land here and you won't be able to go past that edge. So it just kind of gives us a safer boundary. So we'll close that static body up there. This template includes the very useful, incredibly useful GodotXRtools. I've thrown together a quick player with cyan and magenta hands. We have directional light with an error on it because it's set to a funny scale, which doesn't cause any problems, but I'm just going to fix that so we don't see the error. I will update the template. You won't see that. So we got a directional light. We got XR player. We have a start XR node. So when you put your scene in webXR, it works. Then we've got a world environment. When you want to change your sky, what you're going to want to do is you're going to go to this little picture of a sky. And then you'll click on Sky Panorama, and you can drag a new image there, or you can reset it entirely and use a procedural sky material. But let's jump into it. So first thing we want to do is we want to set up our exploding wall. So to do that, we're going to go into Assets for Demo, and we have Break Apart. That's our wall. We'll drag that right up to the top of Breakerland, the name of our scene, and here it is. So the size looks pretty good too. That's great. So I'm going to go ahead and select the rotate function and rotate this 90 degrees. Was that 90 degrees? Yep. So that we're already facing it. And I'm also going to press S and, oh, sorry, that's Blender controls. I'll hit the scale button. Or better yet, I'll just go to the transform setting and we'll go to the scale section. We'll go to 1.2 maybe, just to make it a little bigger so we have a little more space to work with. I think that looks great. So now that we've done that, we want to actually put this inside another static body. So we're going to click on Breakerland and we're going to press Control A and choose, start searching. We'll do static body 3D. You see it's giving us a warning that it doesn't have a collision. We'll take Break Apart and drop it in there. So there it is, static body with Break Apart in it. And let's rename this, actually. I'm going to leave static on the end so you know what it is. We'll rename it Walls, static body 3D. And it still needs a collider. So we'll press Control A again, type collision. We'll go to collision shape 3D. And we're actually going to set up a few colliders on this scene. For the collision here, we're going to actually add 2 colliders. So for the broken region, we're going to add a simple cube collider. So we'll do that. We'll select static body 3D here, press Control A, add a collision shape. And then we'll add another one because we're going to need it. And we'll call this one hole. And then we'll know that this one is the wall. Maybe I'll put it at the beginning so we can't really see it there. There we go, hole collision. So for the hole collision, we're just going to make a simple box mesh and we'll move that in front of the hole, or the area where the hole is going to be, and we'll grab these little dots, which is sometimes tricky because the gizmo gets in front of them, and just size that fill that space. And if you want to move things symmetrically, you can grab these buttons and hold down these little red dots and hold down the Alt or Option key. That scales them symmetrically. So that will be our collision that blocks the actual wall, the broken part of the wall, so you can't pass through there. And then for the rest of it, we've got this. We're actually going to set the shape to be either a concave, or I think in this case we'll do a convex polygon. And now we're actually going to need to get to the pieces of this GLB. So we'll click on Break Apart, we'll right click, and we'll choose the option Make Local. And we got all these pieces in here. But here's Wall and Animation Player. So let's drag those out. So we'll drag those all the way up until we get to Walls, Static Body 3D. Place them right in there. And then we'll close Break Apart again so we don't have to look at all those pieces. And then you'll see when we click on Wall, there's this button here called Mesh. So now we'll create a collision shape. There you can see it's drawn that around. And, oh, it's actually made a collider for it. My mistake. So we can actually delete this one. Whoops. So now we've got one shape collider that is a tri-mesh that goes all the way around, and then we have this simple box collider in the middle where the hole's going to be. So things are getting there. Things are looking good. And we can close those sections so we don't need to see them anymore. Now, if we click on the animation player, we can see if we hit play, there it goes. The wall bursts right open, and the pieces land in space because they're animated. They're not using physics. It's not a looping animation, and that's a good thing. So we could set it to auto load here, and it would just play when we go in. But we don't want that. We want to actually trigger this animation. So to start, we're going to create a new object to experiment with. So we'll click at the top where it says Breakerland, and we'll go to Scene, create a new inherited scene. We're going to go into Add-ons, GodotXRtools, Objects, and Pickable Scene, and open that. And we're going to rename this to Break Ball, because we'll break it with ball before we use the hammer. And let's save this before we forget. So now we can just press Control S to save. We don't want to save it in the add-on folder, so we'll just go all the way up to the top. And there it's called Breakball Scene, named after our top node. We'll hit save, and that's great. So now in this scene, we have a collision shape, but it doesn't have a shape to it yet. So we'll just add a sphere collider. So there you can see it is. And now we'll press Control A again, and we'll add a mesh instance 3D. We'll make that also a sphere, and you can see it's actually, let's see, yeah, it's the same size as the collider, which is perfect. So on that mesh, we can click on the ball there, and then here for material, it says empty. We can click on that, do new standard material, click on the material, albedo, and we'll make it yellow, a little dark, so it's just easier to look at. And that's ready to go. So now we'll just press Control S, and we've got that. Back in the main scene, we're going to set a few more things up. So here, back on this static body here, we're going to click on that animation player. We're going to Control A, and we're going to add an area 3D node. And that needs another collision, interestingly. And we're going to give it just a simple box collision. So we'll press Control A. We'll add yet another collision. It's just like collisions all day here. Collision shape 3D. And we'll just set that as a box. And we don't need to put a shape in here, but we're going to do it temporarily so we can see it, because we're learning how to do this for the first time. So on the collision shape 3D, we're also going to press Control A again, add a mesh instance 3D, and we are going to make that one another box. And for this one, we actually have this thing called GLTF, and we'll click the box. So where it says material empty, we'll drag that right in there. And now the box has this kind of glassy, translucent look, which will just help us see what we're doing. So having done that, we'll click Area 3D, and we'll move that box so it's not right in front of us. Just have it kind of I mean, not on top of us, we'll have it just right in front of the wall, but not in the wall yet. So now we need to communicate with something, but it needs to be ready to listen. So we're going to click on the animation player. I'm going to right click there, and we're going to attach a script. And we're going to add to the beginning of it, break. It's going to break the wall. So we'll hit create. And now you can see it switched to script view. If you're ever lost here, you can just go from 3D, 2D, asset library, scripts. And you can see it's got these two, it's got extends animation player, and then it has some functions for starting right in the beginning of the scene. We don't need any of that. So we're just going to immediately delete that. So we just have extends animation player. That's all we need. And now we're going to go back to this area 3D, and we're going to go on node, and we're going to add a signal to talk to that script. And that signal is going to be this one right here, body enter. So we'll double click on that. And now we navigate all the way down to the bottom. And here is animation player, the area 3D, and it says connecting from, so we can see that's the one. So we'll click on that and say connect. And now we have a little script in here. It just says on, we could have typed this directly into on area 3D body entered, and then it's not doing anything. And what it's going to do is actually going to be an incredibly simple thing. We're just going to do play, and then set up some parentheses, set up some quotes, and you can see it already knows what we want. So we can just double click on break, and there it is. So when something goes into that square, it's going to start this animation. And we'll see in a second that this just playing an animation unlocks so much functionality because you can program the animations to do almost anything you want. So now we'll go back into the 3D view, and we've got the break ball here. So we'll drag that into our scene as well. And this is grabbable, pickable. And we'll just put that anywhere. It's going to fall on the ground when we start, so we can pick it up. And essentially what's going to happen is if we put this ball into this box, the wall should explode. So let's see how that works. So we'll hit play. Scene's a little dark. We might want to add a little light here. So we knocked into the box and nothing happened. And that's because we didn't pay attention to the next part of this lesson, which are layers and masks. So you can see if we select this ball here, or let's go with the area first. So if we click on area 3D, we can see in our inspector over here, we have collision. Now we have these numbers for layers and masks. So this is set to exist on layer 1. So anything that's sort of the first layer, that's what the floor is and all that stuff. And it's masked, so it only receives things on, it'll only receive things that also live on layer 1. Now, if we click the break ball, go to collisions, we can see the break ball actually lives on layer 3, but things on layer 1, 2, and 3 can touch it. So that's why it doesn't fall through the floor. Even though the ball doesn't touch the floor can touch the ball, and that's good enough for it not to fall through. So as long as something works, it'll go through. So we could set the area 3D to receive on section 3, and that would work. But section 3 is kind of the standard channel, standard layer for grabbing things. So we might want to go with something else there. Another thing that's kind of interesting to note, I'll expand this out, is there's another function here on the ball, which is when it's picked up, it actually changes. So when you hold it, it's on layer 17. So I think what we can do is we're going to have the ball, we'll give it a special layer that's not touching anything else. So we'll have the ball live on layer 19. And we'll have it also exist on 19 when it's picked up. You might be wondering why I don't just use the number 17, and that's because we might want some things to break the wall and other things not, and 17 is the standard channel for when things get picked up. And you don't need to memorize that. You can kind of explore around and see as it goes. So now that that is set, we're going to click on the area, and here for the masking, we're going to set it to also receive on 19. Make sure that's what we want. Yeah. So now if we hit play, we should, when we knock the ball into there, it smashes open right when it goes through the square. So this is major progress. A little hard to see what's going on in this scene, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to press, I'm going to add another light to the scene. I'm just going to add Omni light. A little bit kind of low over the scene. We'll drag this circle larger so it can cast light, shadows and whatnot that reach the scene. Turn shadows on. So you can see shadows from the directional light and the Omni light now. And turn the energy up a little bit. And we can also go ahead just for fun and make the light a little warmer. That looks nice. So that worked great, but you might want it to only knock the wall if you're holding it or if you're throwing it. And to do that, we'll go back to our breaker ball object there. So our break channel is 19. So if we turn off the ambient channel, I'm calling it that, just the non-grabbed or picked up channel. When I say, I should stop saying channel, I mean layers. I take the non-grabbed layer and turn that off. And now we'll run this again. And now you'll see that if we kind of just like kick the ball through that box, nothing happens. You get it out of there so it doesn't instantly trigger it. But if we take our hand, and with the simulator, you use the scroll wheel to make the hand go forward, and you go up and down. You hold down E to activate the right hand and Q for the left. So we can grab this ball, and now we can turn back around, and you'll see that if we push it in, the wall smashes. So now it only works if we're holding it. So that's up to you. If you want it to work either way, you can have it set to both. If you only want to be able to throw it, you would turn off picked up mode. So bumping it against the wall doesn't work, but tossing it will. If you don't want it to accidentally roll into the wall, give it a cube instead of a spherical collider. So that's the basics there. But now let's kind of refine this a little bit. And we still have, by the way, one more problem. So if we run this again, you'll see so now it's just active completely, so we can kick it in there again. It smashes the wall, and that's really satisfying, but we still can't get through because we smashed the mesh because that's an animation. It's just an illusion. The collider is still there. So to do that, we're going to add some more animations. And we've got this animation player ready to go. And it's kind of overwhelming because it has all these animation tracks for each of these fragments. We'll scroll all the way to the bottom, and we're going to customize some things so we have a better experience here. So for the walls collider, so we have the whole collision shape right there. We're going to open the transform window on that. And we've got this animation window opened with the break animation. So everything's just going to be part of that. And here for the position, we'll double click on this key and we'll create a new keyframe for it. So now it has its own keyframe line. And so at the beginning of the animation, the wall is in our way. And then we'll scroll out to the end of the animation. And then here in the transform position, we're going to take that Y value and just set it to -8. And now you can see that wall collider has dropped way out of the way. And we'll hit the key again. And now you can see, we look at it from this angle, when that animation runs, the collider gets out of the way. So then you can go through. We have another problem though, which is this collider here. First off, we don't really want it to be visible. So here's the area 3D collision. We don't actually want it to be visible. That was just for demoing. We don't really want it to be in front of the wall either. So first thing we'll do is we'll move that so it's right in the space where the hole is. We'll expand it a little. You can see that collision is getting a little bigger. We'll also make it a little more trim. Go back to the beginning of the animation so we can see how it fits on the wall. And, you know, whatever shape you want. If you want it to fill the whole area, that's great. But this should be good. And now for that mesh instance that shows us where it is, we can just go ahead and delete that because we don't need that anymore. We just want to, that was just for demonstration purposes to understand how this works. The collision is kind of thick behind the wall. It doesn't matter because you're not going to interact with it there, but we can kind of customize it. And something that's important to note about this Area 3D node is you can see right now it's masked for layer 1 and layer 19, which means that if we play this animation right now, the wall is just going to explode because the code is just when body enters, explode the wall. So if there's really a specific body, you can actually add an if clause in the code. But another thing we can do is we can just turn off the mask for layer 1. So now it only receives things on 19. Now, you might be wondering why I picked that number 19. So if we go to the XR origin, which is our player here, and we scroll down, I mean, there are a lot of numbers we can pick, so it was somewhat arbitrary, but we have the player body in here, and you can see that that player body exists on layer 20, and then it will receive input from all these different layers. So I didn't want it to be on a layer where the ball could hit us when we're holding it, because then it will knock us around and get in our way and cause us to fly out of the scene. So I didn't want it to match one of those mask numbers. And I also didn't want it to be on layer 20 because then we could break the wall by walking into it. So that would also be a problem. So that's where that number came from. Of course, there's still a lot of options, so it's somewhat arbitrary, but that's the logic behind that. So it is, if you have things that are working strangely in your scene, you know, check these channels for other things. Of course, adding an if clause will avoid that work. So we will add that information either at the end of this video or in the description of how you can do that, because it's just one more line of code. So now coming back to this collider here, we have kind of an interesting situation here now. So we've turned off the Area 3D's response to layer 1. So if we play it again, it doesn't explode right away. So that's good. And we can just run and kick that ball into the wall. And that's great. That explodes. I'm going to grab it. And this is the problem, though. Watch this. If I back up and I go back into the hole, the wall explodes again. Because the Area 3D is still triggering the animation. It's kind of entertaining, but not what we want. So to fix that, we're going to add another keyframe to our animation. Now, you might be wondering, if you've used Godot before, why didn't I just use the animation to change the layers and masks on this collider? And I could have, I just wanted to do it in 2 different ways. So you can see that there's 2 different ways to do it. So we've got our animation player opened, and we're going to our Area 3D. And here it is. It's set for mask 19. And expand that out so we can see all of it. We've got 32 masks. And I'll scroll all the way back down to the bottom. And here where it's set for mask 19, I'll double click on that and we'll create a new keyframe. So there it is, collision mask. And now I'm not even going to go all the way to the end of the animation. I'm just going to go like a little over half a second in. And I'm going to turn this off and turn it on to 32. And add another key. So you can see that number says 32. And if we can scroll it back, it goes back to 19. Now, so I'm going to save again. And it looks like our wall is a little bit above our floor. Maybe I'll just fix it with the floor. Well, we'll take care of that later. So before we test this, we're going to add one more element to this animation. So here we go to the walls, close all those break apart sections. We go back to this animation player and whatnot. We'll just click on the walls part right here. And we're going to press Control A. We're going to add an audio stream 3D player. And in that audio stream 3D player, we're going to put a sound. And I showed you guys that video of dropping the markers at the beginning of that. So I slowed that sound down a little bit, threw it in here. So here we have it, breakball MP3. Sounds a little more thunderous when we slow it down to half speed. So we'll take breakdown wall MP3 and we'll drag it right into the stream, right there. So there, it's ready to go. Oops. And we've got the animation player open to break. So again, just this one tiny little bit of code, play, break, we can tie all these different tasks to it, which is so handy just with one Area 3D node. So here where it says break wall MP3, I'm going to go down to this one playing, and I'm going to hit a key, create a track for it. We'll scroll down, there it is. And we go into like 0.2, 0.3 seconds. And now I'm going to turn on and whoops, turn on playing, key that too. There you can see. And it's not looping, so we don't need a setting to turn it off. So now when we hit play on our animation, it crashes. Should work. I guess before we go in, we can just take this whole thing. So because everything is inside the walls node, we don't have to worry about our colliders and things and Area 3Ds moving around. We can just move that down a little bit so we don't have that funny gap there. And now we can hit play. And there's our ball. Walk up to it, hold down E for the right hand, Q for the left hand, WASD to move. The ball's getting away from me. Whoops, grab that. Oh, maybe I don't have grabbing on the left hand to fix that. All right, grab it with the left hand, and now we can step through, drop it, and we can walk through. And the ball doesn't re-trigger it, we don't re-trigger it, so everything works as it should. Of course, it's a little weird that the floor doesn't keep extending out here. That's an easy fix, of course. We can just go to the mesh instance that is our floor, and just scale that way up so we can see the wall smash onto something. So this is all looking great. So now it's time to make our hammers. So we can have a real hammer and a dud hammer. So we will click on breakball right here. Or actually, what we'll do is we'll close all these assets up, find it in our asset library. There's breakball, and I'm going to duplicate it and call it. I'm going to make the weak one first. So let's rename that. So we can actually duplicate that for most of the features of the other hammer. So we'll make hammer weak. And we'll open it up. Here it is. So the first thing we want to do is change the name of the node to hammer weak. Otherwise, it'll just look like breakball when we bring it into the scene. And we can leave our collision here for now. But we want to go to that mesh instance, and we will delete it. Now, here's our assets for demo, and here's our hammer, GLB. We'll just drag that right into the scene. Now, got a hammer in the scene. And it's already a nice size. You can see it kind of fits in that collision well. It's a little big, actually, but that's okay. We'll just scale it down a little. So scale it down a little bit. I think that looks good. And now we're going to fix up these collisions. So we'll take this sphere collision and reset it and turn it into a box because we have a boxy hammer here. And we'll use these little red dots and align that up. And then you can actually add a second one. So another collision shape, also a box. You might be wondering why not do a mesh collider on this thing. And I find that for static bodies, mesh colliders work really well, but for active bodies, they can really be a processing burden, especially for webXRs. And let's see what this looks like in the scene real quick. So we'll go back to our main scene. We're going to take the break ball and move it behind me and hide it because we don't need that now. And then we'll go to our weak hammer scene, drag that up, move that out a little bit, lift it up because it's going to fall on the ground anyway. That looks good. So now let's see what's going on with this. So the collisions on this by default, it's set to exist on layer 3, and when you pick it up, it goes on layer 17. So right now, it will not break the wall. There we go. And it looks nice on the floor. So I'm actually going to hold the E key and press the number 1 to crouch. And now I'll press W to walk up to the hammer. So my hand is right over it. Oops. And I'll hold E, put my hand in there, and grab it. And this is like this looks like a really dumb way to hold a hammer to me. This is not inspiring. I don't like it. So we need to fix that problem right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the weak hammer, and we're going to add a grab point. So here in the assets, we search grab. Here's grab points. And we've got grab point hand left, grab point hand right. We'll just do the right hand for now. So we'll do both actually. So we'll grab those grab point hand right, hand left, and we drag them both up all the way to the top. And we're going to turn the eyeball on both of them so we can see them. And they're inside the hammer right now, so we can't see what they look like. So we'll hit G for grab, Z for Z axis, and we'll drag them out. And there we have these two kind of gross looking flashy hands. I think I might be able to set them up at the same time. So we'll rotate them on the Z axis by 90 degrees, rotate them on the Y axis by 90 minus degrees. And now we can place those right on the hammer. And you can see they look kind of small on the hammer. We don't want to make the hands bigger. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go to these structures here, and we'll select all of them at the same time. We'll actually scale that down. So we're scaling down the mesh and the collision, so the hammer is kind of better suited for a hand. And we'll go back to those grab points and move them onto the hammers. Let's see, does it look like they're on there? Almost. We got to tweak them a little. So we'll hide, we'll hide the right one for a second. Or sorry, we hit the left one. And we'll grab this one and we'll just bring it down a little bit. I think we could still shrink the hammer a little bit. Notice I'm selecting the hammer and the collision shape when I shrink it. And back to those grab points. That looks pretty good. Our right hand looks good. So now we'll switch to the left hand and just bring it up a little bit. So we got both hands in place, and we'll hide those because we don't need to see them. Those are just kind of snap guides for how the hand will position itself. We'll save that again, and then let's also add a sound. So we get a little sound when we pick up the hammer. Do that again. I have the sound. Just grabbing that bracelet and squeezing it, which I think makes a nice, satisfying grab sound. So we're going to put that in here. So the first thing we'll do is we'll just go to the top of the node and we'll add an animation player. And then to the animation player, we will add a audio stream player 3D. And I believe I have those sounds in a folder here. Yep, it's called Hold Bracelet. Drop that in there. I can preview it to make sure it's the right one. Yep, nice little trippy sound. I hope that translates. I'll make sure the next one does for sure. And just for fun, I'll actually move that sound right into the handle so that if you're lucky enough to put your head near your hand when you grab it, you'll hear it in the right place. Right, mouse is dying there. And now let's set that up. So we need to create a new animation. So new animation, we'll call it hammer sound. And go to this audio stream, which doesn't need to be parented in there. It can be anywhere in the scene. And we'll go to playing, and we'll just turn that on. We'll create a keyframe for it. Okay, so with the sound set onto the animation, now we just need to add a script to the animation player. So right-click, attach script, call it grabby sound, and let's call it grabby sound, animation player, and hit create. And there it is. We'll delete that stuff we don't need. And we don't actually need to go to an area 3, make an area 3D node this time. We can just go to the top node, and over here in the node menu, this has signals too. And there's one called grabbed. So we can click on this one called grabbed, and we'll double click that. And we'll connect it to the player. Then here, same thing. Play, parentheses, and there it is, hammer sound. And I actually don't go into our main scene, and we'll hit play. Walk up to that hammer. Now it looks like the left hand really doesn't grab. We'll fix that in a second. We'll go down with the right hand, and even if we grab it at the top, the moment you grab it, it's in the proper position. We can fly our hand away until it, oh yeah, it doesn't smash the wall. Forgot about that. But can we throw it at the wall? Yeah, it'll bounce off the wall. But it doesn't smash it because this is the weak hammer, and that's right. That's what we want. All right. So now let's make the strong hammer, and then we'll be done. So we go here to hammer weak, and we'll press Control D, and we'll call the new one hammer strong, and we'll hit duplicate. Now we'll double click on that, and here we are. We've got a similar scene. So here for the animation player, we got hammer sound. We're going to create another animation here. So we'll make a new animation. Click OK. And we're going to call our new, whoops. I don't want to call it new animation. Oh yeah, we'll rename it to strong. We'll set this to strong. So we're in the strong hammer. And let's add some interesting animations here. So here for the mesh within the cube, but if you don't see this, you just right click on the GLB and go to make local. We can go into inspector, And we can see it has blend shapes, and those are shape keys. So if we drag this out, there you go. You get these cool spikes. These spikes come out. These spikes come out of it. So what we're going to do is we've got strong selected. We'll hit the key, and we will create a blend there. And then we'll scoot it to the end of the animation. I kind of want the spike to come out a little more slowly. So here for the duration of the animation, I can actually make it a 3-second animation. So we'll go to the end, we'll drag the shape key, to value. Let's go in there, value 1, and now we'll hit another keyframe. So now if we play this animation, when we pick up the hammer, these cool spikes will come out. Now, it'll be cool if this one makes a sound too. So we still have this audio stream player here, but I'm going to clear that sound, and I'm going to go into my assets, and we can just give it another sound that's kind of more exciting. So I have this sound here. Before I did it with this music when you hold it in my demo, so you know you have the epic power of the spiking mace, but I feel like that's not quite right for this hammer. So I have another one here, which I called drum jumble, where I just kind of recorded a few different drums on top of each other. We'll put there. It's just kind of a neat sound. So now when you pick this up, it'll play this. So you'll know this thing means business. Click a keyframe for playing off. Create a track. And now I'm going to have the track start about a few seconds in, or not a few seconds in, like a second in. And that way, yeah, and then you'll have the super hammer. Okay, can we also change the color on it? That would be cool. Let me see that. So when I click on the mesh part of the hammer, which is called Q, if I click on the hammer itself, I can look around in here, and there's this option called Surface Material Override. So I'm going to click that. I just add a new standard material. And I'll click on that again. And we'll go down to the albedo. And we will set that to be kind of a cyan color. Make it darker. Maybe we'll also make it metallic and a little shiny. But then here for the color in particular, I'm going to click that and create a keyframe for that too. So there we have it for surface material next to blend shapes. And I'll put this on to the end of the animation, and I'll change that material to kind of a golden-ish color. That looks good. And keyframe that too. So now when we pick this thing up, we want it to totally transform. And I think we got the music start a little sooner, so let's drag that waveform back. That's good. So that's how we'll know the hammer is powerful. So we've got that sorted out, and now the animation player, it already has a script. So when the hammer is grabbed, we want to play the animation here called strong. But then we're going to add one more function. So we'll go one more signal, I mean. So we'll go to hammer weak, and we'll go to, oh, we forgot to rename this. Whoops. Hammer strong, because that's what we're working on. And we'll go to the node here, and we have released. We also have dropped. So we'll go with released. We'll double click that and add it to the animation player. And when it's released, we're going to also say play. And we're going to have it play reset. So that's just going to reset the animation when we drop it. Now we'll save that and let's see how that's looking. So we'll go back to our main scene and we'll go to 3D view, of course, and let's put these hammers somewhere where we can see them. So we'll add another static body. We'll add the collision shape. We'll set that to cylinder. For the mesh instance, we'll set that to cylinder as well. Now we'll take this whole thing and we'll just move it right to the side here. And I'll scale the whole thing up. Whoops. Scale the whole thing up a little bit. So we kind of have a little table here where we pick up our hammers. Now let's get the weak hammer. And we'll put it right over the table. Doesn't need to be touching it because it'll fall on it when the physics begin. And then we will get the strong hammer, if I can find it. Hammer strong. Drag that into our scene too. Take that strong hammer. We'll put that on the table as well. And let's also add a little soundtrack for our scene. So we'll add another audio stream player. We'll just leave it. Or we'll take that actually and put it outside. Put it over here somewhere. So it's kind of off center. And for that, we'll go back where I have some sounds. And I have one called wind and howling. So I'll drop that in there. You can hear that sound. Turn it down a little because it was a little distracting last time. And we're just going to set that to autoplay. We don't need to set any special functions for that. So now when we save, play, you hear some of our animation started for a second in the background when we can play. And here we are in our scene. And grab that hammer. Young, turned yellow. Look at our scene. And whoops. Oh, it doesn't break it because we haven't set it to break it up yet. So the animation works, the grab point works, everything's almost there. We just need to actually set the collision on the hammer and we're done. So here we will go to hammer strong, and when it's picked up, it'll also function on 19. And if we throw it, it will also function on 19. So now we can just play that one more time. We'll do it quickly this time. Hammer. Watch it change. Now, just run at that wall. Or through. Discover more wonderful things. If you want to quickly have this up on webXR so your friends can try it out, first thing we're going to do is we're going to open GitHub. If you're totally unfamiliar with GitHub, then you can go learn about. I recommend you learn about that. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a new repository. We'll call it Hammer Create Repository. And then we're going to show it in the Explorer. There it is in my Documents folder, GitHub Hammer. Looks good. So now here for my project, I'm going to go to Export, go to Add with HTML5. We're going to type capital XR on that. We'll go to Export Project. And we will navigate to find our GitHub folder. Oh, it's in Documents, GitHub, there we go. And there it is, Hammer. And we will call our scene index.html, like standard website, and we'll turn off debug and we'll hit save. It should export rather quickly. All right, and we close this and we pretend we didn't see any of those errors there. And go back to GitHub, and here's all our bits and pieces. We'll call it Hammer first as our notes for our notes. And we will commit, publish. Here we want to turn off keep code private. Now while it's uploading, it will tell you if it gives you a warning, or not a warning, if it tells you that your file is too large to upload, 90% of the time it's for this reason. So if we are back in Godot, if we click on these materials that came out of our GLBs, and we go to the import dialog, by default, a lot of these switch to what's called VRAM compressed, which in theory should be good, but it tends to create these enormous files. And you can't see that they're enormous files because they're stuck in this single package. So if your file comes out too big, check your assets with the import dialog and change them all to lossless or lossy accordingly. Pretty much, I think that most things you can change to lossy to make your file a little smaller. The exception to that is normal maps and things that add kind of like a bump texture. So going back to GitHub, we can now view on GitHub. Here you go to settings, and we already set our scene to public by checking not private. Go to pages and go to GitHub Actions, and we have the option GitHub, Jekyll, or static HTML. We want that. Hit configure. It creates this file for us. We pretend we know what it means and hit commit. It changes. And now we go back to settings, back to pages. And usually it should show us our website right away, but sometimes it doesn't show up instantly, and you kind of just reload it a few times. And there's our site. So unlike other platforms like A-Frame or Wonderland Engine, this just works in VR, so it'll fail if we try to enter it. It'll just, say we don't have a VR headset. But this is ready to go. Anyone with this link can now experience this.